In a rapidly evolving landscape of conflict, the Middle East is witnessing heightened tensions as Israeli military actions intensify in Gaza and Lebanon, challenging fragile ceasefire agreements. Meanwhile, the situation in Yemen escalates, with US and Israeli airstrikes targeting Houthi missile facilities, reflecting a broader regional struggle. The special coverage delves into the complexities of these interconnected conflicts, examining their implications for regional stability, humanitarian crises, and international diplomacy. Join us as we explore the latest developments and their impact on the lives of millions in the region. A New York Times investigation has revealed Israel compromised civilian protection protocols during its ongoing war in Gaza. The report highlights flawed targeting methods and inadequate assessments of civilian risk based on interviews with over 100 Israeli soldiers and officials, as well as testimonies from Gaza residents and legal experts. A leading organization monitoring global food crises has withdrawn a new report this week, warning of an impending famine in the northern Gaza Strip due to the near-total Israeli blockade after the United States requested its removal, according to U.S. officials speaking to the Associated Press. This move followed public criticism from the U.S. ambassador to Israel regarding the report. The rare public dispute has led to accusations from prominent figures in humanitarian aid and human rights who argue that the work of the U.S.-funded Famine Early Warning Systems Network, which aims to provide data-driven analysis by neutral international experts, could be compromised by political influence. A UN humanitarian air service employee has sustained severe injuries in an Israeli airstrike on a Yemeni airport. According to a World Health Organization spokesperson, the injured staff member is receiving treatment at a local hospital. The Israeli strikes have hit multiple targets reportedly linked to the Houthi movement in Yemen, including Sana'a International Airport. Yemen's authorities have confirmed that flights resumed at Sana'a International Airport just one day after it was targeted by Israeli airstrikes. A Yemeni Airways flight was seen taking off, with several other planes also on the tarmac, despite shattered glass and debris visible throughout the airport. The strikes resulted in 4 fatalities and nearly 20 injuries, including airport workers and travelers, according to Yemen's Deputy Minister of Transport and Health and head of the Civil Aviation and Meteorology Authority, Yahya As-Sayani. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that Israel will continue its military campaign against the Houthi movement in Yemen, declaring that Israel is determined to sever Iran's arms in the region. According to Al Masira TV, the Houthis' main news outlet, the airstrikes killed 2 people at the airport, 1 at the ports, and wounded 11 others. The Houthis have not yet commented on the attacks, although they have previously launched drones and missiles towards Israel in what they describe as acts of solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. And for more analysis on the latest updates, we are joined by Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri, Managing Editor of Al-Ahram from Cairo, and Mr. Jim Moran, a former United States Democratic representative from Washington. Welcome to both of you, and I will start with Mr. Ashri. Now, the New York Times investigation revealed Israel's deliberate compromise of civilian protection protocols in Gaza. How does this blatant disregard for international law exacerbate the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and what can be done to hold Israel accountable?
كل تأكيد الخروقات الإسرائيلية الخاصة في قطاع غزة
in the Gaza Strip over the last 14 months were extremely severe. here, and it has been highlighted by the international reports, including the International Court of Justice, and other reports have detected evidence on the ground that there is a genocide and racist acts against Palestinians. Many of the international organizations, including the UNRWA, recently was saying that Gaza Strip is the worst place in the world regarding the killing and starvation. And there has been international condemnations against Israel. This has tarnished the image of Israel inside the Western communities, including the EU. And this was like what Israel did in Kamal Adwan hospital, burning the hospital, and this constitutes a great deal of deliberate genocide and a breach to international protocols, and this has been ratified by the UN reports that is the one that is monitoring all these kind of practices. And a lot of Mr. Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, over the previous month has been denouncing this and denouncing the Israeli acts in Gaza Strip, and said that this is beyond the human imagination, and that the Israeli commitment of killing is condemned internationally. Some organizations went to Gaza Strip and came out with very negative results and collected evidence and reported the genocide and the killing, and they all made their testimonies before the UN and international institutions. All these practices has led to a resolution by the International Criminal Court that condemns Israel, and the court referred Gallant and Netanyahu. And there has been more condemnation from international courts. The international community is now obliged to stop against the Israeli practices, because what's happening on daily basis in Gaza, like what happened in Kamal Adwan Hospital and the refugee camps, is a great deal of violation of the international law and international humanitarian law. And without the American coverage, there could have been swift tribunals and accountability against the Israeli leaders for what is being done in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip.
Mr. Moran, the U.S. pressured the withdrawal of a famine report warning of an impending crisis in northern Gaza. How do you see this as a reflection of U.S. complicity in enabling Israel's blockade, and how does this impact humanitarian organizations' ability to operate?
Some things need to be understood. For one, Israel does not feel as though it has to be accountable to international law, only to U.S. politics. And the reality is that the Biden administration has proven itself to be too weak and cowardly to stand up to Bibi Netanyahu and his government when it chooses to act like a bully, and that's what they have been able to do. They know they can act with impunity for two reasons. One is the weakness of the Biden administration, but secondly, President-elect Trump has said, get it over with, do what you need to do, just get it done by the time he takes office. So that means the Israeli government has 3 weeks to destroy as much of the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, and in general, Palestinians, whose land they want, as well as their economies and their infrastructure. And so we should expect to see over the next 3 weeks as much killing and physical destruction as Israel can possibly wage, of course, with our political cover, our money, and U.S. weapons.
Mr. Ashri, with Gaza on the brink of famine and suffering from relentless aggression, what role should regional actors and international organizations play in ending Israel's blockade and ensuring humanitarian aid reaches those in need, especially after we heard Mr. Moran saying that Israel is going to take advantage of the coming 3 weeks to make extensive attacks on the infrastructure in Gaza?
Let me speak to you very frankly. The international community has completely failed in confronting the Israeli practices over the last 14 months. So we are not expecting any much movement over the next 3 weeks till Trump comes to office. So this gives more opportunity to Israel and gives more military leverage and political backing to Israel the way US did. So that's why Israel is extending its operations in Gaza, and so far 45,000 has been killed and more than 100,000 injured. So there is no wise voice in US or in Europe. Even the weak administration by the US has given cover to Israel and give it time and give it the cover to kill the civilians. Including all the UN resolutions, even the one on ceasefire was not implemented on the ground. Netanyahu deceived everybody and went to negotiations without getting to anything. There were 5 rounds of negotiations to get to a deal and to a ceasefire, and still Netanyahu is putting sticks in the wheels and failing all the kinds of initiatives and efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the US. So the international community really failed in exerting any pressures. Even the international court's resolutions regarding holding Netanyahu accountable and having and Netanyahu and Gallant, but France, Britain, and others were not very much pro this resolution. And they said that the law of each country will be seeing how to deal with this. This totally failed in the end because of the American pressures and the American allowance of the Israeli army to do what they want.
So, Moran, Israel's airstrikes on Yemen targeting Houthi facilities represent an expansion of its aggression in the region. How do you assess these actions, and do you believe that they are justified under international law?
Who are you asking? Are you asking me?
Yes.
I think the Houthis expected and perhaps wanted some reaction. They want to be recognized on the international stage. They are in a geostrategic location right next to a shipping channel, so they can be seen as a real threat. They know that there were going to be repercussions as they send missiles to Tel Aviv, to any part of Israel. Of course, we know that over the last quarter century, all of the missiles that have been aimed at Israel have been largely ineffective. And whether it be Iran, Hezbollah, Houthis, whatever, this is kind of performative politics, if you will, because they know they're not going to cause any real destruction to Israel, but there is going to be a reaction, and that reaction generates attention and I think sympathy to some extent throughout the Arab world. I do think the Houthis will dig in deeper. I think this is exactly what the Houthi leadership expected. I think many Yemenis will suffer in the process, as they have really for the last many years. But it's so far away from Israel that Israel can't really strategically target real opportunistic sites like they did in Gaza and the West Bank and even southern Lebanon, because it's pretty far away. But even so, there'll be destruction of Yemen. But frankly, given what has happened in the past, there's not a whole lot to destroy of Yemen. It's kind of destroyed itself, unfortunately.
Back to you, Mr. Al-Ashri. Now, still talking about Yemen. Yemen has resumed flights at Sana'a airport despite Israeli strikes that caused fatalities and destruction. How do you view Yemen's response to these provocations, and what might the Houthis' next move be in the face of Israeli aggression?
These Israeli practices yesterday, 6 operations against Yemen, Hodeidah, Sana'a, and this has really led to more Yemeni determination to launch more missiles against Israel. One was launched this dawn, but intercepted by Israel, and there is more of threats voiced by the Houthis, and Abd Salam, the spokesman for the Houthis, say that Houthis are determined to launch more missiles on Israel. This war will take time. It will be long because of the distance between Israel and Yemen. And the Israeli attacks will not be consistent and continuous. There will be interrupted attacks by Israel, and Israel will try to target some of the leaders of the Houthis and hit some of the military institutions, because Netanyahu and his foreign minister vowed to cut the arms of Iran in Yemen, and the Houthis are the last strong arm of resistance, and Israel wants to get rid of this group so as to prepare for the next phase when Trump comes to office, so as there will be a confrontation between Israel and Iran in 2025, and this will be supported by Trump administration. So Netanyahu wants to have some gains inside and to postpone his judicial pursuit against him. So he goes to war against Houthis and anticipates a war in Iran, against Iran, in order to stay as much as possible as Prime Minister of Israel and to cover for his crimes. And there will be more ignition of war between Houthis and Israel, because the attack on Hezbollah and the fall of Bashar al-Assad has pleased Israel to continue its path towards attacking the Houthis to prepare for a war against Iran. There will be more escalation in the region because the Houthis have got ballistic missiles, a big storage of ballistic missiles coming from Iran. They will attack Israel, but it will not be achieving much. But Israel is having a long arm and supported by US and Britain, getting more intel about the civilian and military institutions inside Yemen, in some areas in the western coast of Yemen controlled by the Houthis. So it will be a long war, and when Trump comes to office, there will be Israeli, American, and maybe British as well bombardment against Houthis, maybe in January or February 2025, in order to eliminate the Houthis the way eliminated Hezbollah and Hamas.
Well, before we move on, let's take a moment to watch a report about Israel's 302 ceasefire violations in Lebanon.
Israel committed yet another violation of the ceasefire established in Lebanon last November. The Israeli occupation forces' actions, including airstrikes, drone fights, and heavy machine gun fire, with significant damage to homes and properties. This is part of a larger pattern of aggression that has seen over 302 violations and claimed the lives of 32 Lebanese civilians. Lebanon has formally filed a complaint to the United Nations Security Council demanding action to prevent further Israeli violations. The ceasefire agreement, which was supposed to ease tensions after weeks of deadly clashes, has instead been consistently violated by Israel. On Wednesday, the Israeli occupation forces escalated their attacks, including drone flyovers over Beirut and heavy bombardments in Ben Jibil and Baalbek, causing extensive property damage and amplifying the suffering of civilians. This brings the total violations to 302, leading to both civilian casualties and increased instability in Lebanon. In response, the Lebanese government filed a new complaint with the UN Security Council, highlighting the increasing frequency of Israeli provocations. With Israel's persistence in violating the ceasefire, Lebanon faces mounting pressure. The future of the ceasefire now hangs in the balance, and the need for international intervention to stop Israel's acts of aggression becomes ever more urgent.
And we are still joined by Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri from Cairo and Mr. John Moran from Washington. I will go back to you, Mr. Moran. Despite Lebanon filing multiple complaints with the UN, the international community has failed to act decisively. Do you think that this inaction emboldens Israel to continue its violations? And what should the global response be to curb these aggressions?
The United States, the United Nations has proven itself once again to be pretty much a paper tiger. It's a chat shop, if you will. People sit down and they talk. I think that the leader, Mr. Gutierrez, is a terrific person, and there are many wonderful people working within the UN and for the UN. But in terms of the Security Council, it's too compromised. It doesn't have any real power, any more than, frankly, the International Criminal Court does. Power comes from military might and economic wealth, and so when I saw that Israel had gone after southern Lebanon, I thought, well, maybe this conflict throughout the Middle East is going to stop, because there are a lot of accomplished Lebanese Americans. And when it gets too bad, they speak up, and then the conflict stops because they have political influence here in the United States and other parts of the world. So I'm not surprised that Israel didn't really push its drive into Lebanon very much. They just wanted to get after Hezbollah and hurt Iran. But I don't think we can expect much from international bodies, because they can't back up their words with action. And they've proven that for the last more than a year.
Mr. Ashri, Israel has violated the Lebanon ceasefire agreement over 300 times, killing civilians and causing widespread destruction. How does this unrelenting aggression reflect Israel's broader strategy in the region, and what are its implications for Lebanon's stability?
Unfortunately, all the statements and all the positions coming from Israel and from the Prime Minister and the Israeli army, there is an intention to stay in Lebanon even after the 60 days stated in the ceasefire. There is 1 month left of these 60 days, and the UN, including some international institutions, have got enumerated all these violations and monitored all these violations and said these are deliberate. The UNIFIL yesterday asked Israel to withdraw according to schedule. Najib Mikati, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, said that the Lebanese army is ready to control and spread in the due places, but the statements in Israel yesterday and the day before means that Israel will stay in South Lebanon even after the end of the 60 days, after the remaining month expires. And this shows that Israel wants to stay in Lebanon as soon as possible till things settle in Syria, to see whether there will be tension in Syria, will there be continued smuggling of weapons to Hezbollah. So Israel wants to stay in, and Israel will stay also when Trump comes to office till Netanyahu redraws the Middle East. So Israel will not be submitting to any of the pressures from the international parties or the Arab parties unless Trump is the one who pressures Israel, because he would say, you signed the truce in November 27 and you have to be committed till January 27. And apparently Netanyahu wants all the fronts in Gaza, Lebanon, and Yemen, all the fronts hot till Trump comes to office, and to get more support from the Trump administration to prepare for his upcoming war against Iran, because he wants full elimination and absolute elimination of Hezbollah, so as it will not be back to the Litani River anymore. And there are many doubts that Hezbollah will be committed to that, and Hezbollah will accept the defeat, and maybe Hezbollah can reform itself in 5 or 6 years. But under the Israeli pressures, it's a very big crisis for Hezbollah. And Israel is everywhere in Lebanon and in the south of Syria. Israel wants to make chaos in the region, at least in the upcoming month. And after that, the Middle East will be tension, peace, war, nobody knows.
Well, I'd like to thank our guests for today, Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri and Mr. Jim Moran. Thank you very much for sharing your valuable insights and shedding light on these pressing issues. We appreciate your time and expertise, so thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of today's special coverage. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.